Welcome into the Campus Connection. I'm the host, Drew Martin, alongside Big Man on Campus. You can find him on Twitter at Jeff Nadeau. Jeff, how you feeling today, bud?
Oh, Drew, doing great on a Friday. Always good talking college football with you. We did the Sun Belt the other day. Going to start another conference today. Always good to talk a little college football with you. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We're just doing this one live. I think we got a live chat going, so feel free to chime in on any Conference USA type talk. But let's get right into this. CUSA East Division is what we're going to be breaking down. We'll go in ABC order, starting with the Charlotte 49ers under Brad Lambert in his fifth year here. Last year, only 4-8. The year before, 2-10. I'll tell you this, though. Their quarterback, Clue, I watched him in a couple games last year. He's a dual threat guy. I think that he can make some plays happen. However, this is a tough division, big man. I mean, when you start talking about G5 divisions, I think that ODU, WKU, Marshall, Middle Tennessee, even the Florida schools, it's just tough for them not to finish at the bottom. How do you feel about the Charlotte 49ers this year?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think 4 wins last year. I think that's going to be a tough thing to achieve this year. Hassan Klug, I like. I mean, I saw him last year with A&T, North Carolina A&T. For anyone that doesn't know, North Carolina A&T is a fairly good program at the FCS level, and they're a team that's you're going to see late in the season on TV. He was good in those games. He actually gets to play his old team this year, which probably will be a guaranteed win for Charlotte. The problem is, Drew, like you said, the out-of-conference schedule is really tough. I mean, you have Eastern Michigan, Kansas State. They will win that North Carolina A&T, but you mentioned this conference, a lot of good teams. This is not the same old Conference USA. You also look on the defensive side of the football. Charlotte lost one of their better players, Larry Oganobi. He went to the NFL. So, again, there's just a lot of things about it, and it's just really about process of elimination with Charlotte. You want to look up and say Brad Lambert has this team, kind of on the right wavelength, and he does. It's just the problem is there's a lot of better teams in this conference, and they're just kind of process of elimination last.
Yeah, when you start talking about like I guess the stock theory of buying on Charlotte, they got a good stadium, I guess pretty good recruiting area there. Brad Lambert's a good coach, but I would buy on him more 2 or 3 years down the road. Right now, it's just you touched on it. I mean, the division is just too strong.
There might be 3 wins here. I mean, look, we've talked about Georgia State. They're not a very good football team. UAB is coming out of the doldrums and reliving that program all of a sudden. So, I mean, there's some winnable games, but, I mean, I think 4 wins would be a complete success. They're going to have to recruit better. And unfortunately, they're just a team, Drew, that's just not going to ever be very good. They don't really get the recruits. It's a tough area to recruit in, and they're just by process of elimination last. But I'm not even really going to be looking to bet on them either, just because it doesn't really, for me, present a lot of value to bet on a team like Charlotte. Maybe getting a big number at home or something like that, but I want to see what Klug has to offer before I get involved anywhere with them.
Okay, well, let's go on to FIU, the Panthers. Butch Davis in his first year here. A lot going on there in South Florida with the college coaching. We got, FAU, FIU, obviously with 2 big name headliner coaches, and then obviously going up there against Miami and all the Florida schools. Hell, pretty much every school in the nation is recruiting at least South Florida. But when you look at FIU's schedule, and again, I mean, in this division, this Conference USA East Division, having to play that, plus at UCF, at Indiana. So those are 2 tough games right there. Although I doubt they'll beat any of those 2 teams. They should get wins against Alcorn State and Rice. But how are you looking at betting the Panthers this year?
Look, I think they're going to be a better team, Drew. Butch Davis is in there now, and he's already doing a good job recruiting. They're already 4th in recruiting, which is pretty good out of this school. I mean, you're one of the better recruiting schools in a conference like this, especially where they are. I mean, that's a pretty impressive feat. Alex McGuff's back healthy, which is a big thing. He was in and out of the lineup. He was ineffective at times when he was in there, but he's back fully healthy. They have a pretty dynamic running back, Alex Gardner. They're an experienced team as well. I mean, they already have a lot of higher class players, a lot of seniors, a lot of juniors. And look, I think the bad start to 2016 will be fixed. I mean, you look at some of the issues they had. They lost to UMass last year. They did not play well against Indiana. I don't think Indiana's as good as they were, over in past years. I'm not high on FIU. They're not going to be a team that I'm looking to bet or get involved with quite frequently. But I do think they'll be better. I think Butch Davis is a capable coach. He's a guy with kind of his own team now, kind of like Lane Kiffin, a couple miles away. It's their team. It's their recruiting. It's their everything now. Again, this conference is tough because there's a lot of teams here that you probably don't ever anticipate being very good. They're kind of just, hey, if we make a bowl, that's great, and we'll try to get better. You see this a lot in college basketball. You see teams that really will never be good, but you always see them playing good football or good basketball teams, things like that. They're just looking to keep their program afloat, maybe get to a bowl and make some money. At the end of the day, a lot of these teams are tough to kind of get a read on, and you really got to watch them kind of as the season starts. But Drake will say, I think early on, I think they'll give Indiana a little bit of a game. They did not play well last year in that game, first game of the season. I had them in that game. They were in it for a half and then just kind of got ran out of the building. I think they'll be better in that game. You mentioned Rice and Alcorn. I think it'd be a little bit better start for them, but like Charlotte, it's going to be tough for them to compete in this conference.
Yeah, FIU and Charlotte, two teams that I think could get better in the future. I mean, their stadium situations, each of them have newer stadiums that could sell better to recruits. Alex Magoo, he is a kid from the Tampa area. He was actually a higher recruited kid for Conference USA. I believe he was a three-star recruit. So for FIU to get him was pretty good. He's kind of underperformed so far in his tenure here. He's a senior. If he can really turn it on this year, I think that FIU could have some success. But yeah, their schedule, you touched on it. It's just tough in this division. We got a couple guys in the chat. Mitchell saying Drew going back to back today. Yeah, Mitchell, you got to do what you got to do. Alex, what's up, man? And then Cambridge giving you some love, big man. I caught late night on campus when Donnie said, "Big man quit SBR." He got me good. Happy it wasn't.
Donnie played a little joke on the listeners the other night. I was had a couple computer issues, Drew, and he said that I was fired. At some points, I think I might be close to being fired, but hopefully I don't. Drew, one other thing. You mentioned the recruiting FIU's been able to do. It's not the worst place to recruit. I mean, Miami, pretty good area, pretty nice. Florida International, you're just up against some of the big boys, but they're doing a good job recruiting. That's one good thing. So, how was the game, Jeff? Well, from a game perspective, last night it sucked. I mean, the Phillies got shut out 10-0, but it was nice to see Donnie. It was nice to see some of my friends. One of our listeners was down there with us. We caught DeGrom. We had the over, so that worked out for us. It was fun. It was nice to see some of the guys, and we had good seats. So, it can't all be bad. But it's two bad teams. Drew, the Phillies and Mets, they're bad teams. But again, we got a winner, so it worked out.
It's still fun. How does that work with getting to the games there in Philadelphia? Is there like transit, or you just always drive? Or
well, Drew, I lived in that neighborhood for a number of years, so for me, I just kind of walk a lot of the time, or I'll park at a friend's house. But no, you could take subway right to the stadium. The stadium complex in Philadelphia is really nice. And for Phillies games, Drew, there's not a lot of people going, so it's not the worst thing in the world to get to. But it's a nice area. Unlike other stadiums, Drew, it's not in the middle of a city. It's more in South Philadelphia, kind of a little bit more open. So it's a great area. Everything's in one area, so it's fun. We enjoy it.
Okay, cool. Well, let's get back to a little CUSA action in the FAU Owls, Florida Atlantic. They're in Boca Raton, a team. It's a tough one to gauge, I guess. Lane Kiffin comes in here in his first year, is 6th overall. If you don't know his story, you're probably watching the wrong show. DeAndre Johnson comes in from FSU, I believe punched a girl in the face, but, welcome to FAU. He's going to be likely the starting quarterback. I don't know. I mean, Jason Driscoll, have they named a starting quarterback? I'm not sure, big man. But Jason Driscoll did look like a kid that was improving. And also Daniel Parr, only a sophomore. I thought he played pretty well last year. I mean, for a 3-9 team, I guess he played as good as you can. Any opinion on FAU?
Well, from a standpoint of moral and ethical, I think it's pathetic that they're bringing this kid in. Look, second chances are clearly needed. But, I mean, when you have things like this going on. It might be just better if you're Lane Kiffin to just maybe look another way. I got to tell you, I mean, Jason Driscoll, at times has looked pretty decent. I know our friend Gabriel Morency is very high on Florida Atlantic, and I don't want to knock his prediction. I do think this is a 4 or 5 win team. The problem is, I think they're more of a 4-win team as opposed to a 5-win team. And we're looking at win totals as he was. You really got to look at every game. And I know he did his homework, but for me, I don't know if they're better than North Texas. I don't know if they're better than Marshall. Marshall is a better team, which we'll talk about. I like what they did. I like the guys that they brought in. I think the Kiffin family will do some good things down there. They'll be able to recruit, maybe not always on the right way or the right up-to-board way of recruiting, but I think they'll do a nice job. They have the Kiffin, the Clifton clans down there, Drew, and they have the whole family there. It's a family affair down in Boca Raton. They won 3 games last year. They bring in Johnson, who on the field, he kind of reminds you of like a poor man's Francois at Florida State. He's going to be able to run with the football a little bit, probably do some pretty good things. But, Drew, there's 2 things I don't want to do in my life, and one of them is bet on the Kiffins because they're just a parade of nonsense. And B, I don't really want to bet on Florida Atlantic, especially a team that has had some trouble over the years. I guess they did put Lucky Whitehead into the NFL, which is something to be excited about. But you really have to get down to brass tacks with the schedule, and you're going to start out 0-2. You'll beat Bethune-Cookman. You'll probably beat Buffalo, but then you get Middle Tennessee, Old Dominion, loser. North Texas, I think you'll lose. At La Tech, I mean, there's some. I think there's 4 wins in this schedule, Drew, and you're right at that win total. So I think they'll be better. I think they'll be worth looking at maybe from a spread perspective, getting a lot of points. But they were bad defensively last year, and they were just average offensively. New coaching staff, not really a recipe that I'm looking to get involved with.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up Gabe Morency's speech, which, by the way, was very entertaining, a very good speaker. But when he brought up FAU, I side more with you, big man. I mean, bringing in Lane Kiffin, they're kind of a little bit of a trendy pick to have like wins.
Great point.
And when you go down their schedule, and I remember Gabe going down their schedule, he was counting off teams like at Buffalo as a win. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't just chalk that up as a win,
Even if you do chalk that up as a win, which I'm fine with. I mean, the Bulls are bad. I mean, they're not good. They're one of the worst teams in the MAC. But let's say you even count that as a win. fine. You win Bethune-Cookman, that's 2. I don't know if they can beat FIU towards the end of the year. I mean, they're probably a pretty even playing field there. At Charlotte, you might win that one, but there's only one guaranteed win on the schedule. And I think, at the end of the day, you make a great point. I'm not a big fan of backing first-year coaches. They're much more conservative. They don't want to mess up or get anyone mad at them at the higher-ups. And look, Drew, last year, this was a hideous defensive football team. They were really, really bad. And I don't know if that's going to get fixed just because Lane Kiffin brought them. And you know what else, Drew, that I don't like also? You're installing this up-tempo Kendall Briles offense that if it doesn't work, your defense is on the field a lot more than it should be. I'm not as – listen, there's 130 teams to pick from. I'm not picking them as a team that I'm looking at, but in a year or two, maybe. But right now, just too much hoopla around this program, which I don't think is warranted.
Yeah, and good point with the more up-tempo from FAU because especially their defensive line. So this combination, as far as betting FAU from a spread perspective, their defensive line is likely the weakest position on the team. And when your offense is running very much up-tempo, that is not a position you want to kind of lose all the gas.
I mean, they gave up 515 yards a game last year and 40 points a game. I mean, that's not good at all. That's among the worst in the country. So, yeah, they're going to have to do a complete rebuild. And I don't think just because you make a couple coaching changes, that's going to fix your issues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily betting their season under win total under, but I'm not going to be on their over for sure. But let's move on to the Thundering Herd for Marshall. Again, we're going down in alphabetical order here on the Campus Connection with Big Man on Campus. Find him on Twitter at Jeff Nadeau. CUSA East Division alphabetical order. Next up is Marshall. The Thundering Herd finished 3-9 last year. Doc Holliday in his 8th year here. Big man, going over this yesterday on my final notes here in Conference USA, this is the team. I don't know what to think. I'll admit it. I'm not likely going to be involved with them definitely not from a season win total perspective, but I doubt I'll get involved in the first couple weeks of the season. Where do you sit with the Thundering Herd?
I'm pretty positive on Marshall. I really am. And Drew, I don't know how you can't be. I mean, again, I know there's some difficulty thinking that they're a lot better, but I got to tell you, I don't think 3-9 was indicative of Doc Holliday at all. They had a tough year last year. They weren't good defensively. They weren't good offensively, which is weird because usually we remember over the years, Rakeem Cato for many years, took this team to bowl games, had a great offense. Awesome. Yeah, he really was. He was one of my favorites. But Chase Litton really didn't play well last year. It was just average. They didn't get a lot of offensive production really anywhere on the field. But I think a bounce back's in order for Litton. I think Doc Holliday really felt the seat getting warm. He went out and really bolstered this defense, brought in some JC transfers, really some big improvements over what they had last year. They're led. They have a four-man bolstered running back group led by Keon Davis. I think they're going to be able to run the football a lot better this year. Their offensive line's improved, and they have one of the better tight ends in the country in Ryan Juracek. So he gives Litton a bit of a valve there. Look, I don't know if they're going to be a ton better, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them go bowling this year, Drew. I really wouldn't. I think, a guy like Doc Holliday is able to recruit pretty well in that area in West Virginia. I think they're going to be – I just think last year was a throwaway year. It just didn't really go how they thought it would. They lost some games. I think they'll win this year. And their schedule's not terrible. I mean, Kent State's winnable. I don't think Cincinnati's that good a football team. FIU we talked about. They can win some of these games. Florida Atlantic, maybe a toss-up against Old Dominion or something. I think they're a 5-6 win team. I really do. And I think they're going to be worth maybe looking at betting on. I think the public will be down on this team. They'll just look at their record last year. But overall, they've made some wholesale changes and gotten better. So for me, Litton and Marshall are more of a bet on as opposed to a bet against.
I will say this. Chase Litton, when you look at his numbers, they're really good for a 3-win team. It's almost like what the hell went on, because towards the end of the season, I didn't get to really break down their games as much as I would have liked. But as far as big man, you're high on Marshall, but they got Western Kentucky, ODU, and Middle Tennessee in this division. So do you see them overcoming any of those 3 teams?
I don't know if they will. Again, those are 3 teams that are better than they are. I think they can cover those games, sure. But listen, I don't think Marshall will win anything in this conference. I do think, though, if you ask me, do I think they'll get better than they were? Yeah, I do. Because at the end of the day, you look at some of the things that they weren't good with last year. Defensively, their secondary was bad. I mean, that's probably the strength of their team this year. Really good secondary. No, but to answer your question, no, I don't think they'll beat those teams. But I do think, could they challenge to go bowling? Yeah, I think they could. They're definitely going to be better than last year. Last year was a mirage for this team.
Okay. Well, moving on to Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders, one of my favorite teams in all of college football, really. Rick Stockstill in his 12th year. It's amazing. He's been here 12 years now. Interesting schedule. They got Vanderbilt, at Syracuse, at Minnesota, 3 Power 5 teams, all to start off the year. Not to mention Bowling Green, a pretty good MAC program there in the 4th game. So a tough out-of-conference schedule with this Conference USA East Division schedule. So their schedule is really tough. However, I don't count them out at any game on their schedule, big man. When you look down this schedule, I think that every single one of these games is winnable. Obviously, an interesting story with Rick Stockstill as the head coach. His son, Brent Stockstill, one of the more sleeper quarterbacks in the whole nation. In my opinion, the best quarterback in Conference USA. How are you feeling about MTSU this year?
Yeah, I love them. I'm big on Stockstill. I was actually a big proponent of this group last year. I think they're going to win this conference this year. I'm very high on kind of a last hurrah for this team. But you look at, from a school perspective, Richie James and Stocks are only juniors, so we might have an even better team next year. But at the end of the day, you look at what this group did last year. I mean, it set all sorts of records. Richie James, Ty Lee, Brent Stocks. I mean, they had such a great offense. Really just hummed really anywhere they went, and that's what you see in this conference. The good offenses are really good. I mean, they're going to put up 45, 50 points on the regular. You mentioned their schedule early on. They played Vandy last year, and I don't know if anyone remembers, but the game was fairly good for the most part. That game kind of got out of their hands a little bit late, but I think they'll have some renewed confidence, especially early on, first game of the year against a Tennessee team. Syracuse, I think they're going to beat. I think they're a better team. Minnesota's in a rebuild. Bowling Green stinks. The big thing about Middle Tennessee, Drew, they went out and got Scott Schaefer, former coach at Syracuse, a really good defensive mind. I think that's really going to fix some of the defensive problems they had last year. They were one of those teams that really just said, you know what? We're just going to try to outscore you. That's what we do in this conference, and that's what we're going to try to do here. It worked most of the time, but you saw in that game, and especially in that bowl game, they really struggled to get stops. I mean, Hawaii was just a team that could match them. They really kind of just weren't able to keep up with them, and I think they brought in Schaefer to give some semblance to this defense, and I think they're going to be able to do it. Their offense is great. If you can get any performance from that defense, you just knock down from, instead of giving up 36 points, you give up 31. Just be better. Kind of like what they did at North Carolina with Gene Chizik. They didn't get way better. They got a little bit better kind of over the years, and I think that's what Schaefer's going to do, and it's hard to not pick them in this conference, Drew.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Their first game, Vanderbilt is traveling to Murfreesboro to take on MTSU. You brought up last year's game. I believe it finished like high 40s to MTSU had like 24 points. But you're right. That game was neck and neck, man, because I was watching that one closely. So MTSU, in my opinion, is a bet-on team for sure this year.
Drew, by the way, against 2 games against the SEC last year, 545 yards a game for Middle Tennessee. So they can score against anyone. It doesn't matter who they're playing. They're going to be in the games every night because of their offense. So, but again, we heard what Mark Lawrence said in the SBR IFBC. Sometimes you want to look at not playing on teams like this with bad defenses, but they're going to be much better under Scott Schaefer.
And especially against the Power 5 programs, it's not like they're going to be laying big numbers. So
exactly. Good point.
Yeah, especially early in the season before the, I guess, secret becomes.
I've been burned though with this conference. Some of these teams laying big numbers. West Kentucky laying 38. In a Thursday night game, and they win by 35 because of that late touchdown. It can burn you sometimes.
Well, let's move on to the Monarchs of Old Dominion. Bobby Wilder, one of the more interesting coaches, Conference USA Media Days. He's kind of a character there, but they did have a 10-win season last year. So very impressive, although they lose their quarterback, who in my opinion was a very sleeper athlete. What was his name? Washington, big man?
Yep, David Washington. Yep.
Yeah, that guy was good. So it's going to be interesting to see how they replace him. A pretty soft schedule to open, then playing UNC and at Virginia Tech before getting into Conference USA play. But are you looking to bet on ODU this year?
I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year, Drew. That's a little bit of a stretch. I'm getting a little bit of a reactor. Do you hear that? You hear me now, Drew?
You're good.
You there? Okay. I'm hearing a little bit of a reverb, Drew. You hear me?
Yeah, I got you, big man. I mean,
you were muted. I couldn't hear you.
I'm muting it because people are talking in another room.
Oh, gotcha. My bad. Yeah, Old Dominion here. I don't know if they'll be a 10-win team like they were last year, Drew. You mentioned David Washington, who was a converted receiver, which is kind of interesting. You don't really expect to see that, but he came over and was really good for this team. The problem that you have with them is you start the season out, you'll go 2-0. Drew, don't be surprised if they give UNC a game. I'm not high on the Tar Heels this year. This is one of those kind of G5 against P5 teams where they can kind of sneak up on you, kind of like an App State can. Old Dominion's a good football team. They have a good group of running backs with Jeremy Cox and Ray Lowry. They're going to look to run the football. They're one of the better defenses in this conference. And I think from a scheduling perspective, it is tough against 2 ACC teams early on, but I think they can win one of those games. I really do. I mean, we saw what Bobby Wilder was able to do last year. I don't know if they're going to win 10 games. They will go bowling. They will be a fairly good team to bet on just because they really are good defensively. It's the question, though, can Blake LaRussa, kind of carry this team the way David Washington will? I don't want to kind of guess on that early on. I'll take a pass here, but I think they'll be more of a run team and play a little defense kind of team.
So Blake LaRusso was named the starter?
All indications are they have a couple guys vying for the job, but LaRusso looks to be the guy. I do think, Drew, it'll be a lot like San Diego State over the last couple of years. Christian Chapman was kind of a new quarterback. He struggled a little bit, so they really kind of fell on Rashad Penny and Pumphrey in the work for them. They played defense, kept the score low, and kind of grinded you out. I think that's what the Monarchs are going to do. They had a special season last year, Drew. Let's be real. But I don't see any reason why they're not a 7-win team this year.
Yeah, I think if they get good quarterback play, I think bowling is definitely in ODU's future. So, all right, last but not least, arguably the best team in Conference USA. It sounds like we're both on the MTSU train, though. But we still got to talk about the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers here, big man. Mike Stanford comes in, his first year here, his first year being a head coach, which is always a little scary for me as far as betting on these kind of guys. Just a lot going on at the head coach position. It's not the same as the coordinator position. They do have a good quarterback, Mike White, from South Florida, highly recruited kid, transferred in from, I believe, South Florida it is. As far as their schedule goes, they should be Eastern Kentucky, then at Illinois, Louisiana Tech, and Ball State. Likely 4-0 heading into Conference USA play. But are you looking to bet on the Hilltoppers this year, big man?
Well, they're in that Drew, that thing that I said I don't want to bet on. I'm not looking to necessarily bet on first-year coaches right away, but I tell you what, Sanford comes into quite a situation. Mike White is a very good quarterback. This is a great offense. It's really a good year to start with your first year. And if you look at their coaching success, West Kentucky, you look at Brom, Willie Taggart, and Petrino all started at West Kentucky. They're not bigger programs. Sanford is really kind of grooming himself to make that coaching leap. And I think coming from Notre Dame, he really gets put into a good situation. Last year, Drew, on first down, West Kentucky averaged 8.9 yards per play. They literally were on 2nd and 1 every play. That's really amazing. I mean, it just makes their offense hum. It's really difficult to stop. The question I have, can Necarius Fant and Lucky Jackson be, the Taylor, be the George Fant? George Fant's in the NFL now with the Seattle Seahawks. His brother, Necarius, is here. This has kind of been the Fant brothers have been a West Kentucky kind of myth over the years. They've been a good group. They've really done well for this program. But can the little brother be next up for this team? Can DeAndre Furby take a step forward in the running game? They need to involve the running game a little bit more. They become too obsessed with the pass, and maybe that was more of Jeff Brom. Problem is, Drew, defensively, are they better? I don't know if they're better. Again, they didn't merely make wholesale changes. People left the program to go with Brom to Purdue. I think when you're looking at Middle Tennessee and Western, offenses are going to cancel each other out. I think, though, Middle Tennessee made more steps defensively to get better than West Kentucky did. West Kentucky almost says, we don't care at all about defense, and even this year we don't either. We're just going to say, let's hope we outscore everybody. I don't know that I trust them in the pass defense. Run defense wasn't bad. They're actually very good in run defense, but nobody really runs the football in this conference from a high team level. So you got to be able to stop the pass. They're not able to do that.
Yeah, that guy, Nick Holt, I think was the name of their defensive coordinator last year. Yeah, that guy was wild.
Complete nut, Nick Holt. Yeah. He actually went to Purdue, which makes unbelievable, no sense at all. Amazing. True, last year they were actually second in the country in run defense. That's because no one runs the football in the Conference USA, a lot of the big teams at least. So a little bit of a stat I know people throw out, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean a ton. They were 114th against the pass. So, yeah, I like Middle Tennessee in this side of the division. I think ultimately they're going to win this conference.
All right, so big man like an MTSU. I'm kind of like an MTSU too. So it will obviously be a big game between Western Kentucky and MTSU on November 17th. Also, Marshall and ODU, can't count them out. And the Florida schools, like we said in the beginning. I mean, these guys, one of these two teams could really surprise, and even Charlotte has a playmaker at the quarterback position, so points can be scored.
It's going to be fun in this conference for sure. If you like offense, you like to, don't sleep on Conference USA. A lot of good offense and fun for sure.
Yeah, and thanks for chiming in, Mitchell, Cambridge, Guan, Alex. Appreciate your guys' feedback. If you like the content, please give us a thumbs up. Me and Big Man will be back next week with the West Division of Conference USA preview. Anything else, Big Man?
Catch me 12:30, right side of campus. We'll break down the baseball card.
Right side of campus, Big Man on campus, Donnie right side. Find him on Twitter at Jeff Nadeau. All right, Jeff, talk to you next week, bud.
Thank you, guys.